2017, the Lilo and Stitch franchise embarked on its craziest adventure yet. And if you thought that the Lilo and Stitch series was wild,
do not panic. I panicked.
Or the Japanese anime was insane,
Nice move!
you haven't seen anything until you check out what happens when Stitch invades China. But why China? Where's Lilo, and why has Disney made it so dang difficult to watch? Well, today we find out as we uncover the buried Chinese version of Lilo and Stitch. Oh yeah, there's gonna be dragons. If there's one thing we've learned about Lilo and Stitch over the years, it's that when it comes to the little blue gremlin, anything and everything is possible. Sure, there's all the cute and cuddly shenanigans that we saw in the movies that were all pretty grounded in Hawaii or sometimes in space. Of course, this all started with the original Lilo and Stitch, where both Lilo and Stitch bond over their own feelings of loneliness and grief and end up forming their own kind of Frankenfamily.
Ohana means family.
That's right. And while the franchise expanded with new movies, a new TV series in the US, and plenty of new experiments, things generally remained revolving around Lilo and Stitch and Hawaii and Ohana. Though towards the end of Lilo and Stitch the series, the creative team at Disney started to mix the format up a bit, and even had various crossover episodes with other Disney shows. Because nothing screams Ohana like the kids from Recess or the Proud Family dropping by for a visit.
Look at this, Trudy. Ain't been here 5 minutes, and they're already trying to sell me stuff.
Or Stitch getting kidnapped and Kim Possible getting called into hell.
I can't believe I'm actually standing next to Kim Possible after she saved the world for the 13th time.
It was Lilo who did the saving.
Or characters from American Dragon Jake Long helping to capture one of Jumba's experiments before entering a skateboarding competition.
A magical creature! Being manhandled by some jerk. Trying to bag a magical creature while the Amdrag's on the scene? I don't think so.
And as silly as these crossovers were, they still kinda worked. Especially when you consider the way that Disney teased the original Lilo and Stitch film in 2002.
Oh, Bobby.
Hey!
You get your own movie.
But it was what came next that completely blew the doors off the hinges when it came to the Lilo and Stitch universe. Now, my last video covered the background and just complete insanity of the made-for-Japan Stitch anime, and in many ways, Stitch's Japanese series walked so that his Chinese series could run away from laser-shooting spaceships on the backs of dragons. But it's important to know that it was Japan's love of the Stitch character that led to Disney partnering with Madhouse Inc. to develop a kinda unique but kinda the same version of the little blue guy. Oh, you're wondering what exactly was it that made the series so insane? Well, let's see. There was the episode with Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and the son of Dracula.
Okay, that's enough. Happy ending.
I was a naughty vampire.
One with a time-traveling samurai.
Silence, blue demon thing!
And then, you know, the whole fact that Lilo in Hawaii is nowhere to be found, with only the flimsiest of excuses as to why.
Just because little girl Lilo has new boyfriend now and is all washed up with 626 is no reason to act bad.
It's best reason!
Oh, I'm sorry, Stitch. I meant to meet you there on the beach, but my sister Nani was having a baby and I couldn't get away. I didn't forget. I came as soon as I could.
But what Disney and Madhouse did do was surround Stitch with a cast of characters and a setting that both felt familiar, but also had a whole lot of changes that existed to cater specifically to a Japanese audience. So we have an island off the coast of Okinawa instead of Hawaii, mischievous tree spirits instead of experiments, though those do come later, and a very independent Japanese girl named Yuna who lives with her grandma before moving in with her cousin Tiger Lily, instead of a very independent Hawaiian girl named Lilo who lives with her sister. The thing was, Even though it never fully made its way to North America, Stitch the anime did really well in Japan, producing over 80 episodes and multiple specials over a 7-year run. And just as the Japanese Stitch series was wrapping things up in the early to mid-2000s, there was yet another major global shift in the entertainment landscape. And it was something that Disney would once again deploy their little blue wrecking ball to help them tackle.
For the first time, the largest film market in the world is not the United States, but China.
Warner Brothers is making a big play to take up residency in China.
Paramount co-produced Age of Extinction with several Chinese partners, so that huge opening was no accident.
Most recently, Shanghai Media Group is teaming up with Disney to make a sort of Chinese-themed animation.
The Chinese movie market is growing really fast. It's the fastest growing in the world, and it's number 2 in the world. It's up 43% so far this year. But the Chinese government puts a quota on how many imported movies can come in each year. It's 34. So for a Hollywood studio like Warner Brothers, they can only get in, a few movies per year under that quota. And if they want to take advantage of all the growth in China, they need to be making movies inside the country. And in order to do that, you have to form a joint venture. You can't do it yourself as a foreign company.
Before we launch into Stitch's adventures in China, it's important to understand where these big studios were at the time. Because in the early to mid-2010s, Hollywood was all about chasing that Chinese audience. And so if you were just an average moviegoer and wondering why the latest Transformers movie featured a rogue US agent as the bad guy and the people of Hong Kong turning to the Chinese government for protection, this is the reason.
You see, it takes patience to make a man. The patience to watch and wait, to protect all of us quietly, for God and country, without any recognition at all.
Disney, of course, was all up in the mix when it came to these co-productions with the Chinese government. After their critical and commercial failure with High School Musical China in 2010, the studio hit it big with the Avengers just 2 years later. And so as a follow-up, we not only got Iron Man 3 with scenes that were exclusive to audiences in China, but also let's not forget about...
Most recently, Shanghai Media Group is teaming up with Disney to make sort of Chinese-themed animations.
For their first release, Disney went in a similar direction as the Japanese Stitch anime when it came to the intended audience, which is to say, they were developing this content to specifically appeal to Chinese consumers, not exactly a worldwide audience. Which is why you probably have never heard of Banjing Badiang or Stony and Rocky, an animated series about 2 stone lions who get involved in various comedic incidences while standing guard in front of different buildings. And for their second series, Disney went with a familiar global franchise that hadn't quite taken off in China yet, a franchise that had already shown its ability to be successfully molded around other cultures, a franchise that has shown time and time again that the love shared between a ferociously cute alien and his young female counterpart can conquer just about anything. And it's safe to say that neither Chinese nor Western audiences had any idea what they were in store for. This new Stitch series, titled Stitch and I, debuted on China's national television channel CCTV 14 in March of 2017. Much like the Japanese anime, Disney made sure to surround Stitch with a mix of characters that were both familiar and brand new. Lilo and Nani were both still missing in action, as are Yuna and her cousin Tiger Lily. All have been replaced by a young orphan girl named Ai and her older responsible sister JJ. And so Ai and JJ are basically just the same general character types that we've seen, just with a different cultural overlay. But more on that in a second.
In China, family means your mother and father, and their mother and father, and their mother and father, going back forever. So even though me and JJ are the only ones here now, so it seems like our family is small, it's really big, super big, and you're part of it now.
One major difference from the Japanese anime, though, is that Stitch and I is a true co-production between Disney's animation division and multiple Chinese studios.
This is our 3rd year in a row of hosting filmmakers from China at Disney Animation Studios, and at its core, it's an opportunity for us to exchange ideas, share our approach to filmmaking, production, marketing, and distribution, and the underlying ideas about how to create a healthy and vibrant studio.
It was directed by Tony Craig, who had also directed Stitch the movie, Leroy and Stitch, and had been an executive producer on the Lilo and Stitch animated series. In fact, many of the artists from that series also ended up working on Stitch and I to help maintain visual continuity with other Lilo and Stitch entries. Also different from the Japanese series was that episodes of Stitch and I were produced in English and then later dubbed into Chinese. The series starts back in space, with Stitch having been captured by a mysterious criminal race of aliens called the Djiboutis. Apparently, the Djiboutis are at war with some other alien race, and they're looking to force Stitch to activate a secret metamorphosis program.
You are going to cooperate, aren't you? Experiment 626.
Not 626. My name is Stitch.
This brief introduction is interrupted when the Djibouti spacecraft is attacked by their rivals, who it turns out are also interested in using Stitch's secret program.
That's him! Finally, you are going to cooperate, aren't you, Experiment 626?
Stitch is able to escape in the most Stitch way possible, and as he falls down to Earth, experiences a set of flashbacks and maybe flash forwards. It's kinda hard to tell. While these flashbacks are the only little bit we ever get of Lilo, it's here that we're introduced to both Wang Shen, this series version of Hawaii, and Wang Ai Li, or just Ai, the series version of Lilo. And let's just say that both Ai and Lilo share a very similar character setup.
With your parents gone, your sister cannot continue to raise you alone. So, starting now, you will stay with me in the city.
So yeah, we basically have the orphaned Ai filling in for the orphaned Lilo. Ai's in-over-her-head sister JJ filling in for Lilo's in-over-her-head sister Donnie, and the difficult aunt that wants to take Ai away filling in for the difficult social worker that wants to take Lilo away.
Nice to meet you, Mr.
Bubbles.
Mr. Bubbles.
And of course, these aren't the only similarities to Lilo and Stitch. We've got a rival character filling in for Myrtle, we've got Jumba and Pleakley coming back as part of the main cast, and we've got tons of appearances from all sorts of characters from previous movies and series. But more on all of that in a sec. Ai witnesses what she thinks is a falling star, but is really just Stitch plummeting back to Earth. And after a very on-brand moment,
He's fluffy.
the two quickly argue and then just as quickly become friendly, all before realizing that Stitch has lost most of his memory.
Where'd you come from? You don't know where you came from?
And it turns out that part of that flash forward we saw during Stitch's arrival is really showing us the main quest of the series, some kind of mysterious holy shrine that's important for reasons.
Searching. Important.
What's important?
Shrine.
Oh, there are lots of shrines in these mountains.
Of course, throughout all of this, both factions of the aliens we saw earlier remain on the hunt for Stitch and apparently now have the ability to disguise themselves as humans. And so with all of that, we pretty much have the framework for the remainder of the series. Find the shrine that Stitch saw in his vision, all while avoiding both alien abduction and being taken away to the big city.
Ni hao.
I belongs in the mountains. We'll find a way to stay. Yeah, we'll find a way.
What's this secret metamorphosis program? When do the dragons show up? We're gonna get to that too. But generally, Stitch and I have a very reminiscent setup to the Stitch Japanese anime, in that the primary goal is broad enough that there's plenty of space for things to get wild. And you'd better believe that they do get wild.
Fine, then I'll just peer into your puny brains with a cerulean brain probe.
Before all of that, though, the series has a whole bunch of cameos that are all stuffed into the early episodes. We get both the Grand Councilwoman and Cobra Bubbles, who are also both looking to capture Stitch.
I have a positive ID on Agent Bubbles.
The Councilwoman loops Jumba and Pleakley back into the series, and we also get a brief cameo from Gantu, who is now back with the Galactic Federation.
Hey! How dare you go and capture our ship! I'm going to report this incident to the Galactic Federation, and when they find out that you have flagrantly—
Candid eyeball. They're the ones who sent me.
The Djiboutis and the Woolagons are locked in a space war that threatens every known planet.
The Djiboutis hacked into our data system and found your stealth files. They decrypted everything, including the Metamorphosis program.
Dr. Jukiba is the leading expert on metamorphosis. He built a Stitch with a metamorphosis code which, when activated, would transform him into an unstoppable monstrosity. Now everyone knows about Stitch.
The Grand Councilwoman tells the pair to help her capture Stitch, or else they'll be sent to a very suggestive prison planet, where we also get a brief appearance of one of this franchise's big bad guys.
The infamous Dr. Jacques van Hamsterville! That looks like...
It was designed to look that way, and to be that way.
Jumba and Pleakley link up with Stitch back in China, convince the Councilwoman to let Stitch stay, and instead settle down in Ai's village, much like they did in the Japanese anime. Unlike the anime, Jumba gets back into the experiment creation game, though this time with mystical Chinese creatures called Qilin.
Qilin legends have been told for over 4,000 years. They say the birth of Confucius himself was foretold by a Qilin. Were there real Qilins long ago? Or are they only an illusion?
These basically act as the insert culturally specific creature part of the series, the same way that the yokai did in the Japanese anime. Though much like the experiments from the US series, the Qilin are made entirely by Jumba.
Illusion? Ah, now they are real.
He also creates a gateway to a full-on parallel dimension, where these Qilin he creates can live their best lives, I guess. But before any of that happens, the team has to catch these creatures, or at least convince them to follow along. And so we have plenty of episodes that follow the classic Lilo and Stitch Experiment of the Week formula. In one episode, Jumba creates a dragon that causes mass amounts of destruction around the village until they realize that it's just looking for a mate. And so Jumba just creates another dragon for it to mate with.
Basic pattern of life.
I think it's beautiful. I'm gonna stay up and watch them all night.
In another one, the Qilin is a monster that likes to capture little children. We get another dream-based episode where Ai is briefly reunited with her parents. This kind of episode seems to be mandatory for the franchise, because we got very similar episodes in both Lilo and Stitch the series and the Stitch Japanese anime.
This picture makes her happy. It might help her remember the happy times instead of filling her head with sadness. Then maybe she'll be able to turn her own nightmare back into a dream.
My picture!
That's Yuna's mom?
We lost her when Yuna was very young. Now they can only be together in Yuna's dreams.
My mother! Mother! Father!
Yes, sweetheart. We're part of you too. That's why you see us in your dreams.
I miss you so much. I think of you every day. And I remember all the things you told me. Our family stretches back 1,000 generations.
We are from these mountains, Eileen. We are part of the mountains.
and they are part of us.
The series wraps up with Stitch and I basically entering the Matrix through a device Leakley mysteriously receives, and the pair end up creating brothers for themselves. While I's artificial brother seems all well and good, Stitch's brother Scratch is a complete troublemaker. The more Stitch destroys, the more it triggers his original destructive programming. This eventually leads him to a construction site where Scratch keeps egging him on. Of course, Jumba eventually figures out the source of Pleakley's mystery device.
What planet did you say it came from?
Planety Dubaj. It's the famous planet in the, actually, I've never heard of it before.
The Dubaj spelled backwards is Djibouti.
But by then, it's too late. Stitch's metamorphosis program gets activated and he heads towards a still under construction city for an all-out rampage.
There he is! Only he's changing! We've gotta hurry! Stitch! You've gotta stop this! Stitch! No!
After some brief giant monster action, I is able to cut through the noise in the only way she knows how. And of course, we get one final standoff with the aliens that's just absolutely crazy, with Stitch going back into metamorphosis mode and just wrecking shop on the alien army. And then Jumba opens the interdimensional portal to bring all the Chilean in for support. Meanwhile, Stitch and I hop on the backs of two dragons, and so we get a full-on chase with the alien fighter ships. Of course, the aliens are eventually defeated. All of the destruction caused is attributed to an earthquake, and things pretty much go back to normal.
Stitch, what's the matter? Is there something wrong with the Bingtong Hulu? Why are there tears in your eyes?
Because Stitch has family.
And that's a wrap on the Chinese Stitch series. It kind of exists in this weird middle ground where it feels like it skews a bit too similar to the Lilo and Stitch series, but when it does veer off the beaten path, it also never quite commits to being as out there as the Stitch anime. And yeah, this all makes sense when you consider that Stitch and I only had a single 13-episode season, and that much of the Chinese audience didn't really have a ton of exposure to the franchise. Very different from the Japanese audience, who was already very familiar with Stitch, and so they could easily launch into uncharted territory. Whatever happened to that secret shrine they were searching for? Does Stitch ever get his memory back? Was there ever a plan for a second season? Well, in a 2018 interview, director Tony Craig confirmed that a second season was completely dependent on how well Stitch and I performed in China and the other countries it premiered in. If approved for season 2, ideas would have included more details about this mysterious shrine, what happens when Stitch and company finds it, and the return of some classic Lilo and Stitch experiments. Now, the fact that there was never a second season of this show probably indicates that Stitch and I didn't perform as well as Disney and others had hoped. And it also kind of explains the bizarre release strategy out here in the West. While Stitch and I had its Chinese debut in 2017, and its Southeast Asia premiere in early 2018 on Disney Channel Asia, the series wasn't available in the US until later that year. And even then, the only way you could watch these episodes wasn't on broadcast TV or even one of the cable channels. For whatever reason, the only way to actually watch Stitch and I in the US was on Disney Now, the company's original online app-based streaming service. This availability was only temporary, because just 6 months later, Stitch and I, along with a handful of other series, were removed from the service in preparation for Disney's next big thing when it came to streaming. But of course, while series like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Gravity Falls successfully made the transition over to Disney+, the Chinese Stitch series never made the jump over and remains lost in the in-between. Maybe, like the Stitch anime, which also isn't available in the US, Disney is afraid that such a culturally specific version of the character might turn off fans of traditional Lilo and Stitch. Or maybe they're waiting for this live-action movie to hit so that they can do a bit of cross-promotion. For whatever their reason is, you can still catch many of these episodes spread throughout YouTube and Dailymotion, which I didn't even know was still a thing. And if you're looking for even more international Stitch insanity, check out my video on the Japanese Stitch anime and the steps that you can actually take to watch it.